Let's take a look at some of the setup when it comes to project budgeting. So the first piece of setup that is required in order to use the project budgeting functionality is basically you need to set up some forecast models. And you can think of forecast models as containers to your budgets. So there's 3 that you'll want to set up, 2 that are required, which would be original and remaining. So when you're putting in your submitting your first budget, basically there's 2 fields at the top that we didn't really point out, but it's defining what forecast models that you'll be using. And if you only have 1 of each, the original and remaining, it just defaults those in appropriately. If you have multiple, you have the option to select different ones, but it just takes the first one in the list and puts that as the default. If you're going to use the carry forward functionality, you have to have a forecast model associated with your carry forward budget. There's cost control parameters. We mentioned this earlier, but when we've been creating projects, we've been going in and defining the budgeting parameters on those projects. Like if we're going to enable budgeting and all the other different parameters, well, you can have those defaulted in from the project parameters. There's just a cost control tab, and we'll take a look at that. And then finally, we'll briefly take a look at workflow. We're going to have a whole course on project management and accounting workflows downstream. But yeah, right now we'll just look at the workflows, show you which ones you need to set up, and we'll just take a look at what mine we're doing with the Contoso demo data set. So let's hop into the system and demonstrate this functionality. Okay, for budgeting, the first thing that we need to set up is an actual forecast model. So to do so, we'll go to the Project Management and Accounting module, and under Setup, we have a forecast folder, and then the forecast models menu item in here, so you can just select that. And in the Contoso demo data set, they're already set up for you. You have a carry forward budget. You can see that it's called carry, it has a name, carry forward, and the important thing is the budget type is carry forward. We have an original budget, same stuff, but the important part is the budget type is original, and then we have a remaining, and the budget type is remaining budget. There's other ones that are used for forecasting, and they'll have a budget type of none. So if we want to, we can create a new, let's just create another remaining 2. And what you want to do in here is basically give it the ID, give it a name, and then finally define what the budget type is. And when you do so, notice everything else grays out. I can't use any of these toggles anymore because you just define this for the budgeting functionality rather than the forecasting functionality. Forecasting functionality, when your budget type is none, you can use all these different toggles, and we'll get into that in the forecasting lessons. But one thing to notice is this is a stopped forecast model. So if you try and use this forecast model for the estimation purposes for a fixed price project, it's not going to let you. So just keep that in mind when we start talking about that type of stuff. But anyways, if I go in to a project now, and I'll just grab any project, hopefully they don't have a budget on them. Let's grab our Fun Times Club, my favorite project, and we will enable it for budgeting. Use budget control, sure. And then if we go and just create a quick budget, so what you'll notice up here are the forecast models, and the ones that default in are original or remaining. There's no parameter or anything, it just takes the first one that it finds. Notice we only have 1 in original, but if you want to change it, you can see there my remaining 2 here is now available for selection if you want. Typically, I've seen one used. I don't really think you necessarily need another one unless there's some kind of requirement that you have around them. But in my opinion, just have 1 of each, and then the carry forward as well. But yeah, unless the situation calls for another one, you can always create another forecast model and assign it to whichever type you want. All right, so the next thing that I wanted to take a look at is the parameters. So we're at a good spot right here. So all these parameters, when you create a project, can get defaulted in, And right now, I don't believe budget control is enabled by default, or maybe it is, but we'll take a look and find out. But all these settings can be, yeah, enabled by default. So to do that, you'll be in the project management and accounting module under setup. There's the project management and accounting parameters. And the main area that you want to take a look is the cost control tab. And here I'll just expand them all out so you can see. Some of them are around forecasting type stuff, but so these first two tabs we're not really interested in. What we are interested in is the budget control tab, and you can see here are the defaults. So I guess budget control is enabled by default, so it's on. Independent budgets for sub-projects. So basically, if you, I haven't talked about this parameter very much, but if you have a project hierarchy, you can either submit a budget for all the projects in that hierarchy as one, or you can have individual budgets for every level or for every project within that project hierarchy. And if you want independent budgets, you pick yes, and if you just want to submit them all as one budget, you pick no. So what that means is if you have this at no, basically it will, if you add a new project to your project hierarchy later on, you won't submit a new budget for that project. You'd actually create a revision for the hierarchy in general to add the cost and revenue budget for that new project that you added. Yeah, let's just talk about all these while we're here. Transaction type controlled, we've looked at this quite a bit. You can either control your budgets for the revenue and cost budget, just have it control at the cost level only or at the revenue level only. What do you want to happen if you overrun the budget? We just allow it. We warn users that you're overrunning the budget, or we don't allow it where you get a warning and it just doesn't let you do it. Oh yeah, allow budget control outside the hierarchy. This is if you have an existing budget on a different project and you want to evaluate the project that you created versus that budget. You can pick yes, and then actually on the project you have to specify which project's budget you're looking at. And then budget control interval, we looked at this briefly. This is how you are actually calculating how much budget you're evaluating against for control purposes. So for current period, it will look at the current period's, how much budget you have allocated to that current period, and if you go over that, it would throw an error. Or project to date, how much budget you have based on when your project was created to date, and that's what it's going to try and control the budget based off of. The rest of them are pretty self-explanatory. And then the carry forward stuff we talked about in the carry forward module, we can enable that by default if you're going to allow carry forwards, and if you want to allow a negative carry forward amount. And then check budget on document, oh yeah, on document lines. So basically when you enter a line into a journal or whatever it is, do you want it to run logic to actually check that? So you can either say yes or no to that. And then there's the user group override. If you want to project budget settings for user groups. So there's users that can override whether you allow overruns or whatever. So this group, so let's say that you don't allow overruns, but for a specific group of users you do, you can pick that group of users and then define what their options are here. And you can say valid for all projects, a group of projects, or a specific project. So I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want to run into problems later. All right, so those are your different parameters that you can set up within the project management and accounting parameters. One final thing I want to take a look at briefly is the workflows. So we mentioned that workflow is required for budgeting. So under setup, there's project management and accounting workflows. And the two that you're going to have to create if you're going to use budgeting are the Proj Budget Original and Proj Budget Revision. So when you submit your original budget, it basically uses the type Proj Budget Original. And when you revise it, Proj Budget Revision is used. You can have them assigned to different users for approval, etc. Let's just look at one of mine and see what it's doing. I got to sign in here. Yes, So it's going to launch a web app for me that looks just like it did in AX 2012, which is nice look and feel. So basically we're in the workflow editor here, and you can see for this, when somebody submits it, it basically starts and then it follows the line and it hits an approval element that somebody dragged onto the campus or the canvas, and then it will evaluate what's going on in this approval element. So basically if I look at the properties of this approval element, I can see that there's an automatic action that fires. It goes, hey, when your workflow originator, so the originator is basically the person that hits the submit button, is not a guest, we just automatically approve. So pretty much all the time this thing's going to be automatically approved. If it didn't get automatically approved, it would jump inside the approval element and run the steps. So step one would be, all right, who are we going to assign to? It's going to assign to a user, and it's going to assign to the admin user. And I don't believe they set up any, it's always run this step and there's no escalation path whatsoever. So after that step is run, I'll just back up, then the workflow is over. So when I've been submitting all my documents to the original budget, it's been hitting this approval node, just seeing that I'm logged in as Julia Funderburk, or actually, I can't remember if it's looking at the user account or user relation, but anyways, it's finding out that I'm not the guest. And it says, since you're not a guest, automatically approve that thing and end. Bottom line is, the reason I'm talking about this is that you have to set these up.